Pickleball Diaries presents Cling on the Court with your host, Lily Brown. Let's go!
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Cling on the Court, cracking the pickleball code again. Hi, Jeff. Welcome to come back again.
Hi, Lily. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. So yeah, let's crack some new codes. So what's the topic we're talking about today, Jeff? What's the code we're gonna crack in today?
We're going to try and crack the footwork code. So we're going to talk a little bit about different aspects of having good footwork and what is good footwork and the importance of good footwork in playing pickleball.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like footwork, it's such a huge topic. And then also seems quite daunting. Like we all know, like at this point, we all know, okay, footwork is important. But like, why is it important? Like how and how can we as a new player entering the game, or if we want to elevate the game, what can we do?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say something that I've probably said a few times on previous episodes, but you can't send a good ball in pickleball if you don't receive the ball well. So before we hit a shot, we have to receive a shot. So we have to be in position on time with our bodies and our paddles. Having good footwork allows that to happen, right? If we're in good position to hit the shot, it makes it a lot easier to do what we want to do with our paddle and do what we want to do with the ball. So good footwork and good movement is critical to being a sort of a competent pickleball player. You can get away to a degree without great footwork, but at some point, at some level, it'll catch up with you, even if you have great paddle skills and you have the ability to do a lot of things with the ball and the paddle. If you don't have good movement skills, it makes it a lot harder to do those things if you're not in good position. So at some point, it catches up with you. So good footwork is just really important at all levels. It's also important a little bit to avoid injury too. So if you have better balance and you're in position on time and under control of your body, it's also generally a little easier on your joints and especially your lower back. So lots of reasons it's important, but the main one is it makes it easier to execute shots.
Yeah, so can you describe what is a good footwork more in kind of details?
Yeah, so I
Describe it.
guess if you look at some top players, so some great examples would be someone like Ben Johns or Annalie Waters. So most of us know who those two players are, right? They're the top male and female players in the world at the moment. And when you watch them play, they make it look easy to play the game of pickleball and to hit all the shots at a high level. And one of the reasons they're so good at hitting all these shots and hitting them with consistency and effectiveness is they move really well. So they have great ball judgment. So they read the oncoming ball, they anticipate well, but then they also react in terms of their physical movement. They're always looking like they're in position. And even when they're not in perfect position, they're still sort of like dynamically balanced. So they almost always look like they have good balance because they move well. And even when they're not in the ideal position, they're sort of have good dynamic balance. But those two players are great examples of players that have exceptional footwork so that they can get in the optimal position to execute shots at a really high level. Um, so when you talk about what does good footwork look like, it looks athletic, it looks energetic, but it also looks sort of under control and smooth. So that's what I would say good footwork looks like. It looks energized, and it looks smooth if you're doing it well. And it usually leads to the player having great balance when they're either getting ready to hit the shot or as they're hitting the shot. And then if you have good footwork and good balance, that usually promotes not only better shot making, but it also makes the recovery easier because if you're on balance when you hit a shot, it's usually easier to stay under control of your body so that you can recover and be ready for the next shot.
Yeah, so with, as you said, a good footwork. So you should always have your way at the front. No?
Well, yeah. So I think right, if you mean like you should sort of feel like you're on your toes, but there
Yeah.
might be situations where you don't want to be leaning forward too much because that makes it harder to move backwards. Um,
Mm,
and the more if you're too far forward, you're actually losing balance, right? So when we talk about being ready to move, Generally, we just want like a bit of a lowered center of gravity. So we're sort of sitting down a little bit. Our knees are bent. Our base is a little bit wider with our feet. So our feet are a little wider than our shoulders. And we usually want our posture fairly upright, like a little forward tilt, obviously is good. But we don't want to be leaning too far forward because that can make it harder to move in different directions. But yeah, generally a good ready position. So sometimes use the analogy of like a goalie in soccer or hockey getting ready to make a save. You've got to be like really alert with your feet spread apart a little bit, your knees bent so you can move quickly side to side, forwards, backwards. So with that athletic ready position is critical to having good footwork because it's the before you move, you have to be ready to move. So
Yeah, so I think you just described the first stage of the footwork, and it's be ready, and be ready to have the right footwork to approach the ball, to get ready to meet the ball. Is that right?
yeah, exactly. So like footwork you don't even sometimes need to get very technical with footwork. So if you think about beginner pickleball players or even intermediate players, sometimes just raising awareness with those players that footwork is important or that movement is important, just raising awareness will improve footwork. Okay. And then just maybe a little bit like, yeah, what does good footwork look like? Well, you need to be athletic. So you need to have a really good ready position and look like you're ready to move. And then you need to move with some intensity and then just raising players' awareness like, okay, well, what does it mean to be a good mover? Well, if you're in position before the ball arrives, you've probably done a good job of moving. So just giving a measure of like, okay, on a ground stroke, if we can be in position with a good impact point before the ball bounces on our side of the court, we're going to be that means we're there on time. Or if we're receiving a drive and we're at the non-volley zone and we're about to volley, if we can have our paddle and body positioned behind the ball before the ball crosses the net, that would be an example of being in the right position and being there on time. So just raising awareness that footwork is important and reception skills are important, and just overall trying to have the feeling of moving with a sense of energy and athleticism. We sometimes don't need to be very technical about how we do it. It's more just awareness that it is important. Some people aren't aware that they react really late or that they're standing really tall and upright with a narrow base and they don't look very athletic. A lot of people think they're giving a really high level of effort until you raise their awareness that maybe they could do better, or you maybe show them a video recording of what they look like when they're playing. And sometimes just raising awareness that they can move with a higher level of intensity and have like an earlier reaction to the ball. Often that's enough to improve footwork.
Yeah, so echo back to what you said before, the anticipation, reception skill. So for the footwork, like we need to train ourselves to anticipate where we should go to. The I don't know if I should use the word destination, but it's not like meeting the ball, but where our feet should take us to at the right position to hit the ball.
No, you're exactly right. The ball is going somewhere. So the
Yeah.
ball your opponents are hitting the ball somewhere. And if they're smart, they're trying to do something that makes life difficult for you. So usually that means hitting the ball faster to reduce your reaction time, right? So the reason we hit hard is to make it hard for the players to prepare their paddle or their bodies on time. That's why we hit harder that's why we hit lower. That's why we hit the ball away from our opponents, is to make it harder for them to set up and get in position to hit a good shot. So you're exactly right. Like when we're receiving a ball that is away from us, or even if it's at us, we want to try and position ourselves behind the ball or in a position that allows us to have a good impact point. And we need to do that and sort of do it in a way that allows us to win the race or beat the ball to the spot. So you use the word destination. We just need to be in the right position or what we think is the right position and be there early. So I sometimes use the analogy with players of beat the ball to the spot. So win the race against the ball. Wherever that ball's going, you need to get over there and have good setup and positioning to the oncoming ball. And you need to do that before it's time to hit. Okay. If you're still in motion as you hit, there's more chance that it's harder to coordinate your swing and time the ball and send it the way you want. So beat the ball to the spot, move quickly, try and move early. And again, that comes from your reading skills, so your ability to read the oncoming ball and judge where it is and to get in position quickly.
Yeah, I like what you said, beat the ball to the spot. So
Mm.
is there any way to train ourselves for that kind of reception skill?
Yeah, so yeah, it depends on the situation. So we should always sort of try to think of these, think of pickleball skills mostly in certain situations. So what situation we're in, because how we train the footwork or how we train any skill really is dependent on the ball received and the ball we want to send. So we should think situationally. But yeah, you can train footwork. So if we're talking about maybe a return of serve, or if we're the server and we've just served and we're receiving a return, we're going to have to hit a ground stroke. So a third shot is a ground stroke because we must let the return bounce before we hit it. That's a rule of pickleball. And if we're receiving a serve as the returner, we're hitting a ground stroke because the serve has to bounce before we make our return. So you can train the idea of just having your paddle and body prepared before the ball bounces. So trying to get in position wherever that ball is, try to be there before the bounce and make sure that your impact point is out in front of your body at a comfortable distance and hopefully a comfortable height. And you can just train your reception skills and the ability to be in position before the bounce as often as possible. Sometimes you can train those skills on ground strokes by you can set your paddle down and actually work on just reacting quickly and moving behind the ball quickly and catching it and just drop it and then have someone feed you another one, or if you're using a ball machine, but with the main priority or main focus being in position and balanced with good setup before the ball bounces. That's the key measure or the critical time or moment that we want to be in position by. So that goes for like if you're hitting a third shot drop, that means you're receiving a return of serve. It's important to be set up before the bounce in that scenario. If you're returning a serve, it's important to have your paddle and body positioned before the ball bounces so you can make a good rhythmic swing and have good timing. And again, that's footwork and ball judgment combined, but those two things are always working together. You're reading the ball with your eyes, and then you're using your footwork to position your body in the optimal position. So that's for ground strokes. And then for volleys, if we're talking about maybe a fourth shot scenario where you've just made a return of serve and you're running to the non-volley zone and the serving team's either going to hit a drive or a drop, one thing you can focus on is trying to have, again, good body positioning left to right. So try to move into position before the ball crosses the net. So that's your measure, right? Whenever we train a skill, it's important that we have a specific measure so that we know if we're being successful with the skill that we're training. So if we're training movement and reception, we need to have a specific measure to know if we're being successful with that skill. So the idea of preparing before the ball crosses the net. So have your body and paddle prepared on your forehand or backhand before the ball crosses the net. If you have your paddle prepared before the ball crosses the net, there's a good chance that you'll have really good timing and feel very comfortable executing that shot. But if the ball crosses the net and you're starting to prepare your paddle as it's crossing the net or after it crosses the net, there's a high likelihood that you'll be late with your contact or rushed, which influences your ability to execute the shot. So when we train reception and movement, if we're talking about a volley, trying to have the idea of prepare yourself before the ball crosses the net. If you do that, you'll have good timing, probably good execution. If we're talking ground strokes, we want to move and position our body and paddle before the ball bounces. That usually promotes a better impact point, better timing, which leads to better control of the ball. So that's how I would say you could train those things with specificity. One more thing I'll add. So if we're talking about dinking, dinking, we don't always know if the shot that we're receiving from our opponents, we can sort of read that they're attempting a dink. We don't always know if it's going to be a volley or a ground stroke where the ball bounces before we send back a dink. But the same things apply as we want to be in position, but either before the bounce or before the ball crosses the net. If we're talking a ball that's floating, the earlier we can prepare a paddle or the sooner we can move into position, the more chance we have of having a good impact point and a good timing with the ball, which makes it much easier to do the technical skills that you want to do to implement your given shot, right? So that, and again, this is why footwork is so important. So ball judgment skills, the ability to read, and then combined with that, the ability to move. Without those skills, it's very difficult to play high level pickleball, and it's very difficult to be A, consistent, and B, effective.
Yeah, excuse me. I really like what you said because sorry, something in my throat. I really like what you said. Like basically, footwork, when we train footwork and train the mindset of proper movement, it's more than just like being agile and move around. It's like we have to train the mind to envision where we should move to and the contact point, and then like the feet, the movement gonna go there. So it's more than just the body itself, it's mind and body all together, a holistic training for the footwork.
That's okay. Perfect. So I'm glad you said this because it just drives home the idea of reception skills. And reception skills are so important. So reception is the ability to judge the ball and read it, like you're saying, but then also to move as you're reading the ball so that you can get in the optimal position. So here's some really good examples. If you look, so a lot of times if you watch any pro pickleball on TV or you just sort of stay in tune with what's happening in the pickleball world, you often see these pro-am exhibition matches where they'll have some top pickleball players like Annalee Waters, Ben Jones, Tyson McGuffin, and they're doing these exhibition matches with the best basketball players or football players in the world. These guys are tremendous athletes, right? You see them play basketball, they've won world championships in the NBA. They get out on a pickleball court and they're sometimes, not always, sometimes they're a complete disaster. So, and what that is they have the ability to move quickly, powerfully, with good balance. So they're exceptional movers. Okay, but they have really poor ball judgment. So they don't have the ability to judge the speed of the ball, the height, spin, direction, their ability to read the ball and then position themselves accordingly so that the paddle can be in a sort of optimal position. That's where they struggle, right? So it's not that they lack the ability to move in a physical sense, it's that they lack the ability to judge the ball quickly and move at the same time and judge where they should be. So it's not their ability to move in a physical sense, it's their ability to judge the ball. And so that's why usually, like if I'm working with beginners or players that are new to the sport, a lot of the times we'll set up a certain situation, like maybe it's a return of serve, or maybe it's a third shot scenario. You know, you identify what is the intention with this shot, but then I'm really watching, is it their reception skills or their projection skills that are they're most challenged with? So most of the time with beginners, it's their ball judgment and their ability to be in the right position to receive the ball that is most challenging for them, and it's the barrier to them being better at sending the ball as they intend. So reception skills and movement skills are just, you can't play at a high level or play well if you don't have good ball judgment and movement skills. And those pro athletes that I mentioned, they're a great example of that. They're so powerful, strong, agile, quick, but they don't have the ball judgment skills to complement the physical skills.
Yeah, that's very enlightening. That explained a lot of things. And I like what you said about drilling a new shot, even when you're drilling a new shot, but based on a scenario shot. Don't say, I'm just gonna hit this, but thinking about, oh, that's a returning the serve, or that's the like the certain shot you're working on. Because often we find, I think that's everybody's like comment and perplex is like, oh, when I hit against the ball machine or when I drill, I have the perfect shot. I cannot bring it to the game. What's going on? How can I show in the game? But like you said, so in the drilling, we should already have the whole game scenario built in the drilling. So practicing the reception and it's part of it, right?
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up, like the ball machine and drilling. So we're talking about footwork and like whenever you drill, you're always trying to find a balance between making sure you get a lot of volume and repetition on a specific skill. And sometimes that's at the expense of it being realistic, right? So when we play pickleball, we don't get the same exact ball over and over and over, and we don't send the same ball over and over and over. It's constantly changing. There's a huge variety of shots that we might receive or send in pickleball. But if we want to like really dial in a specific shot and gain a level of confidence and competence with a specific shot, we do sometimes have to sacrifice realism for just making sure we get a lot of volume so that we learn to trust that shot. However, at some point, you must, or you at least should, start to make your training much more realistic. So even with a ball machine, make sure that you have the ball machine feed you either a variety of different shots where you have to make a decision, and maybe one of those decisions is the shot you just practiced, but you need to make it real where you have to read a ball, decide what shot to hit, and then see if that shot can hold up when there's a decision to be made. But what we're talking about today is movement. So when you practice with a ball machine or a friend, you should like receive balls that challenge your movement side to side, up and back. So you should add a movement element because it becomes easy eventually to hit shots from a static position when you know exactly what ball you're receiving. Most people can start to execute shots at a high level of consistency and effectiveness when they're training that way, but you need to open it up, add variety, add movement where you have to move quickly before the shot, make the shot, and then actually make sure you include a proper recovery. And that recovery should either just be like back to a ready position, or it should be in a place that makes sense for wherever you sent the ball. So wherever you sent that ball, maybe there's a corresponding recovery that is makes sense based on what you perceive is going to come back. All that to say, when you're training, you should make sure that at some point you include more movement and make it more realistic, because if you train it statically, it's not realistic. And that shot, you may find it hard to implement that shot and transfer the skill into a real game.
Yeah, totally makes sense. Like I think last time in one of the episodes you talked about when we practice the return of the serve, we hit the ground stroke, we hit a return, we also need to practice move our way forward. Pretend we're charging to the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then go back to the baseline and are ready for the next shot, right?
Yeah, the return of serve moving forward after or during and after the return is really important because you want to get to the non-volley zone to take away space and time from your opponents. So if you're practicing, say, your return of serve, which is a ground stroke, you should ideally practice the setup and then the feeling of moving through the contact if possible, and then take a few steps at least after the return is made, and then you can backpedal quickly and get ready for the ball machine to send you the next ball. But it's a good idea to make it real and include the good setup for the ball and then transition and move through the contact, take at least a step or two after as if you're going to continue forward, and then recover and do it again. So that's a good example of, even though you're kind of maybe receiving the same type of shot, you should at least make it real by adding movement before and after the shot and making sure you have a recovery of some sort. And on the return to serve, the recovery is actually forward. So although you're making it and then going back to get ready for the ball machine, the recovery really is hitting the shot and recovering to the non-volley zone. So yeah, but the message there is make it real at some point. Train with a lot of volume, and you can train in a singular way and it can be pretty static. But at some point, if you don't add movement or add decisions and add a recovery, the transfer of that skill is probably not going to go so well in a real game situation.
Yeah, I really like the topic we're talking about and then the path we're talking about, because I always have this kind of discussion with my drilling partners about training the third, because I find a lot of I would say dominant way or a way of working on the third. You just one player at the kitchen, the other player at the baseline, like just constantly hitting the third and not coming forward.
Mhm.
And I find I find to me, and when I drill too many of that in the real game, I forget to come forward.
Yeah.
I just stay at the baseline and admire my shots, and it was like same as the drilling. Say, oh, look at that perfect serve I made, and forget to come forward. So, like, do you have any suggestions? Like, how do we train our footwork and the movement, like based on the third scenario, and drops and drive? What should we do?
Yeah, so for that's I'm guilty of the same thing. So I'll go out and drill and I'll have my partner at the net and I'll be hitting drives or drops from the baseline. But the idea is that's kind of a third shot scenario. And
Yeah.
my partner just stays at the non-volley zone, keeps popping a similar ball back to me. And there's not a lot of left to right movement. There's not a ton of forward and back movement. And there's no recovery after the shot in terms of moving forward, which after a good third, you're generally moving forward to some degree. So yeah, so what you could do to practice that particular shot is it's okay to do that for a little bit just to get some volume and kind of groove it. But again, it's not realistic. The movement before the shot's not realistic. The movement through the contact might not be realistic, and the recovery might not be realistic. So you can do a serve return +1. So what you could do is like, let's say you and I were drilling, I can serve, you're at the baseline making a return and you return roughly cross court. And then you can run in behind the return. I'll execute a third and you'll just catch my third shot and then we'll switch roles. The key is when I'm hitting my third shot that I focus on good setup because I don't know where you're going to return the ball. I don't know how much speed there's going to be on the ball, the depth, the direction, the spin. So it'll challenge my setup skills or my reception skills more. And then I can execute the third and then I can make a decision, should I run in or should I stay back based on the height of the third or the quality of the third? Because I might drive it, I might drop it. And then you just catch it as my partner. Now you go back to the baseline, you serve, I return, you hit a third, and you make a recovery after the third that is based on the quality of your third shot. Then I would catch it, and then I become the server and third shot dropper or third shot hitter again. So you can just alternate where you do serve return +1, and that's much more realistic, right? But again, you're sacrificing volume. So now there's a bunch of other shots to be hit. So the amount of third shots you're hitting drops significantly compared to what we were talking about earlier, where you're just standing at the baseline hitting drops over and over, but it's more realistic. So the way you would train that, you could do high volume, pretty static, and that's good. You can start to feel your third shot and, but there's not much of a recovery. Then you can do the serve return +1 that I just mentioned. Okay, so that adds some movement to the ball. It also adds movement through the shot possibly, and it includes a recovery after the shot. And then a really great way to work on that and see if it transfers is to play skinny singles. So there's going to be a server, you serve, someone returns, you have to hit a third shot. And now if you get to really find out if it's effective, and you also get to find out if your recovery and positioning after this third shot is good or optimal, because if you're in the wrong position and you're playing points, you're going to pay the price for not having the right recovery position. So that'd be a good structured way of training like movement and recovery skills for a third shot, if we're talking about the third shot.
Yeah, I like that. So, like what you said, I think it's based on what you want to train on, right? Like, as you said, we need to work on the static shot, just kind of get the skill in. But often we forget to practice as the whole combo.
That's
To
right.
practice and to judge about the reception and also, like you said, the recovery. And like especially when you're finishing a shot, how to recover back to a proper ready position based on where your core position is. And I think that link to the whole like hitting the third sequence. And once again, I find a lot of even to 4.0 plus players, it's more about like hitting a good shot. We're all thrilled when we hit amazing shot, but often there's not much anticipation of what should we do next.
Yeah.
So ready for the next shot and what will be the right ready position. And I really love to like continue to talk more about this because with the correct movement, with the feet being there, I think it's leading to a big question is how we really approach with the right footwork, what we should do from the baseline all the way to the kitchen. I think that the baseline footwork and the kitchen footwork is very different. Approaching method is different, also based on the drive or drop, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's different types of footwork required for different situations for sure. So yeah, like running forward after a return of serve that's basically just running steps. You're running forward in it's a more natural footwork for most people at least. And then at the kitchen, there's different footworks you can use. There's like small side shuffles. There's crossover steps where you sort of have to cover more space. So you turn your hips and do more of like a crossover and often into a lunge type of setup position for a dink. So there's different ways to move depending on the scenario and what's required in a given situation. And again, for the most part, like if most people just focused on the importance of like having good setup and reception, so like really valuing being in position with a good impact point on all shots and being there quickly and on time, usually the way most people move it's less of an issue in terms of the technique of their movement. It's more just the urgency and their ability to read the ball. But then if they do have that good quick setup and they're moving really intensely and they're there on time, from a coaching perspective, if we see something like, okay, the way you're setting up your body for that dink, like you're crossing over when maybe you shouldn't be, or maybe you're setting up open stance when you should be crossing over. It's like at that point, then yes, we would intervene and make a correction, raise their awareness that there's a specific way to do it. But oftentimes with footwork, for the most part, it's more of an awareness of like ball judgment and reacting quickly and an awareness that like getting in position with a good impact point is critical. And if you raise people's awareness and train those skills, often the footwork takes care of itself.
Hmm.
And obviously, if it doesn't, if they're doing,
Then
if they're
that's coach's fault.
then, well, yeah, then that's where you coach specific, like, okay, your body position with your feet needs to be this or that. But what comes before that usually is just the ability to read the ball and react, and also just an
Yeah.
idea of valuing and realizing how important it is to have balanced setup and be there on time with a good impact point. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I like that. I like what you said, like as the first step, don't over jamming with the information. Of course, different shots require different, more detailed the technique, footwork, but to start with, just be there first.
yeah,
Anticipate where the ball, where your destination, be there first.
again, I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but footwork, there's sort of three elements to footwork or movement. There's when you move, so how quickly do you react, right? That's sort of
Yeah.
when. Then there's the how you move, which is a little bit like the type of movement, like shuffle versus running steps versus crossover steps, right? So there's when, and then there's how. But it's more important. And then, sorry, the third thing is the intensity. So, like, how much intensity or energy, like, how quickly do you move? So, there's the when do you move? Do you react on time? And then, what intensity are you moving at? Determines how quickly you move, right? And it's more the when and the intensity that's really important for most players. And then, how they're moving, yes, you might need to improve the way that you're moving, but that usually should be not the priority. It should be more like how quickly do you react, and then what's the intensity with which you react. And if those things are in place, usually people will end up in the right position and they'll end up there on time. But if not, then you can intervene and actually look at the specific technique of the movement.
Yeah, thank you. I just through our conversation, I already list a bunch of new questions for you. I think we're running out of time today, and unfortunately. And yeah, so just be ready. I'm gonna shooting out these questions in our next session.
Okay, excellent. I look forward to it.
Thank you, Jeff, and talk to you soon again.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and all the audience out there. And if you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on YouTube Spotify, iTunes, and all the podcast platform. And also please like us on everything you can. Thank you. Have a great day.